Hello everyone and welcome back to Chess Programming Game Design with me. So in the last lesson we worked on the king's castling. We didn't completely finish it, but we added it as a valid move. Today we're going to be working on the en passant as well as the piece changing. The piece changing isn't going to be a major part because we're just going to be separating the moves which would make the piece change to the ones that wouldn't, which is actually pretty simple. So the first thing, that is going to be the first thing that we're going to do. However, first of all, let's make this more efficient. Let's put an or there. I put parentheses between everything just to make sure that it works the way I want it to. So now we can just delete that. And inside of here, I just do a very simple if and else. And what this is going to do, we're working with the white pawn now. So if the white pawn it moves to a row which isn't the top row, then just do a normal valid moves addition. Otherwise, well, for now we are still going to do a normal valid moves add. However, later on we are going to change it so that this is something slightly different to this, so that it's recognized as a different move and it triggers a game event or something that allows us to choose a different piece for the pawn. So that's that done with the pawn. We're going to do the same thing for the black pawn. Just here. And here instead of 7, however, we're going to do 0. And looks like I haven't nested my parentheses correctly or something. What's happened there? I hate it when that happens. There we go. Now it's working fine. Just change that to 0 so that when the black pawn comes to the bottom of the board, and we have them as separate things. So now let's work on the en passant. So we have this normal valid move, that's fine. We're just going to leave that. And then we're going to add another else if and work with this. Again, we're just going to add a valid move for now, add it as a valid move for now. Later on we're going to make it a special valid move. And in here we're now going to check the conditions for en passant. So en passant, let's just show you when that happens. Oh, and of course we're going to have an error because, well, because of this. And the rest. Okay. Let's just demonstrate when it happens so that you guys know what we're working towards. That's going to happen when... so now if I move this black pawn to this spot, I should be able to take this black pawn with this white pawn by going from here to here. So that's how it works in chess. If you want to search it up on Wikipedia or something, then just write en passant. Passant, if I can spell it, there we go. Not enum, en passant. There we go. So if you want to search it up, just search that on Google and you will find it, I guarantee. I just wanted to do a quick demonstration. And that only works for that one turn. So if you move another piece on that turn, you're not allowed to take the pawn by en passant in the next turn. Next time it's your turn. So now let's uncomment this and explain what I have done. So the first thing we want to make sure is that the moves made, well, not moves made, but that the move of our pawn is following just after the move of their pawn moving 2 squares forward. So to do that, we're going to actually need to add a new variable to our game manager, and that's going to be public int turn number. And at the start, we can just initialize it to turn number 1. or we could initialize it straight away, but I think it's better to initialize it and start. Let me see what I've done here. Okay, so we are just going to initialize it straight away. Because when you start the game, the turn number is 1. It's the first turn. I don't know how else to explain that. And so that we don't get any bugs, we have to make sure that the turn number, oops, I just pressed insert by accident. Where is my insert key? There we go. We need to check that the turn number in the canvas is greater than 1. So, quite simple, greater than 1. That's the first condition, and we're doing this because, well, we don't want it to ever go below 1 or below 0, because then we're going to have to deal with out of bounds and things like that. And because we're actually going to using the number to see whether we're allowed to make that move, because en passant requires that the move, if you want to do en passant, the pawn has been moved 2 squares forwards on the very previous move. So in Game Manager we also need to make another variable. For now we're just going to make it simply piece last piece moved. At first it's going to be null, because it's going to be the start of the game, there would have been no piece moved. And then in check selection, what we do is last piece moved equals current piece selection. It's not how you spell selection. There we go. So every time we make a move, the last piece move will become the piece that has been moved. Quite simply. That's going to help us make sure that that was the last move as well. We might actually not use it, but later on we are definitely going to make something slightly more complicated than just last piece moved, but I do want that to be there just in case. The next thing we want to do specifically for white pawn is check that j.end row, i.e. the square that the row of the square which we're looking at is on the row of 5, because that's the only place where where en passant can happen. Only on this row here, because that's the row which the black pawn would be skipping. So we do j.end row equals 5. That's the condition. The next condition, or a few conditions that we want to check, is that, well, there is a pawn behind or just below the piece that we're looking at. So what I mean by this is, well, let's make sure that I'm not going to have any errors here first. So we do again the canvas dot all squares, not selection, squares. And for the coordinates, what we do is we take the row of the piece which we're looking at -1, because we want to look for a black pawn below the square which we are currently looking at. So if this pawn has moved to here, we would be looking at this row, or at this piece specifically, and then we want to make sure that beneath this square there is a piece, and that piece is a black pawn. And then we do for the column j.end col. That's perfectly acceptable. And then we want to make sure that it has a piece in it, so that we don't get any errors like we have been doing before. That's one of the conditions. And then we want to make sure that the piece that is on it is actually a pawn, or a black pawn to be more specific. Dot piece in square is black pawn. Oof, allow squares. It's supposed to be all squares. There we go. And so now what we've done is take for example, we're looking at this square, and imagine this pawn has been moved to here on this turn. So we're looking at this square. The turn number for now has no effect. We're looking at this square. Then using these two over here, these two checking checks that we do, we check that there is first of all a piece in that square, and then we also check that that piece is a black pawn. The next thing we need to check, this is again quite a long thing that we need to check, or for the en passant we have quite a few things we need to check. We also need to check that so let me just do this right now, right here, dot end row plus 1, j dot end row equals j dot, or no, this dot end row plus 1, and it's supposed to be end row. So we want to make sure that if our pawn, so if the white pawn is here, that the piece that or the square that we're looking at is above the piece. This actually is, thinking about it now, not necessary, because we're making sure that the row is on row 5, so we can actually delete it. However, we do need to check that the column is something else. So the column needs to be either below or above. And how we do that is put this and then have an or statement in here, and copy and paste that and put the plus here. So what this does is checks that for en passant the valid move would be either to the right or to the left, and it would allow both of them if that somehow happened, but in a real game that would never actually happen. However, we're doing or so that both conditions are registered as being allowed. And then the last condition we need to check is that the last piece moved, so the canvas dot last piece moved is the same as the piece, the black pawn piece that we've been talking about all along. So this equals that. So the canvas, all squares, and then if we're looking at this square, the black pawn would be there for en passant, hence the row minus 1, and we're looking at the piece in square of that. So this is the white pawn's condition sorted. Now what we can do is copy and paste it for the black pawn, but just edit a few things. Here we go. Else, we can actually just paste it in. First of all, instead of black pawn we do white pawn, obviously. Then here instead of equals 5 we do 2. And everywhere we have end row, instead of having end row minus we do end row plus. So we look for those. That's the first one. End row minus, end row plus, and end row minus, end row plus. There we go. So there were 3 in total. Also, let's change this to the way it's done in the white pawn, so that it's slightly shorter and slightly more efficient. And then we can, oh wait, no, what have I done? This is kind of odd. Okay, that's fine, or maybe not. Oh yeah, so this, I've copied and pasted it in the wrong place, so we just do this. We can just delete that and that, or not that one actually. if you delete the else if, you should be fine. So now let's check that that is actually a valid move. This should be pretty much the same, although we might have an error. Let's see. Oh, okay, that's not a valid move. Let's check my code once again. So the reason this isn't working, there are two reasons. One of them is because we never actually increase turn number. So why don't we do that? Turn number plus equals 1. Another way to do that, to increase something by 1, is to either do turn number plus plus, not equal to, or plus plus turn number. There was a difference between the two, I don't exactly remember what they were. For our case, I don't think it matters. So you can use that, you can use the previous one, which is what I'm going to use, plus equals 1, because I'm using plus equals 1 here as well, so might as well keep it constant. The other problem is, well, even though we're using turn number, we don't actually need it, because we've done the last piece checking in a different way. So we can actually delete that straight away. There we go. The other problem, so now it's kind of going to work. Let me demonstrate what I mean by that. Oops. Wish I had an undo move button. Spoiler. So as you can see, now I can move this piece to here, even though that shouldn't actually be an available move. And although I thought that this would sort that out, we do still have to check for this condition, that the row of the square which we're looking at is the same as the row of the pawn plus 1. If we do that, then that move which we saw now to be valid is not going to be valid. And as you can see, we can't move our pawn there now. However, if we do this, now we can move to there. And that's just what we wanted it to do. So let's just copy and paste this once again, or can we just, would this just be enough? What we need to copy and paste actually is just the row bit. If j, okay, this condition is what we need to paste into here, and don't forget the and. So let's make sure that the white, or that the black pawn works as well now, because we just saw the white pawn working. We're going to leave that. And, oh, okay, something is wrong once again. So the reason why it's not working now is because the extra bit we just pasted in, we need to have a minus here instead of a plus, because we're now looking below the pawn. So I believe that now it is actually going to work. Let's just make sure. I'm keeping that pawn there just to make sure that en passant doesn't happen on it. There we go. However, we can move to there. And we are going to trigger the taking of this piece in a later programming video. You will see how I do that. We're going to have to add 2 new classes. They are not going to inherit from anything. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Now we have sorted out all of the special conditions. We don't deal with them, however, we have separated them from the normal move conditions. So this is en passant. If we wanted to, we can even comment en passant. And also en passant there. And we can also comment pawn on other side here, just so that we know what's happening. At the end we can remove the comments because we might not need them, but we will see. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, then please give me a like, share and subscribe. I appreciate it, as it encourages me to make more of this kind of videos. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.